It all started with a map. A cheap, outdated parcel map printed from the county assessor's website, crumpled at the edges and highlighted in neon pink. The kind of document someone like Karen would cling to like gospel when she's dead set on proving a point. The problem? That map didn't reflect reality. And what it claimed, it set off the spark that would torch months of my peace, and nearly my entire lakefront. My name's Mark Halstead. I'm 46, a retired structural engineer, and I own a cabin-style lakefront home just outside a gated community called Pineberry Shores. The neighborhood wasn't technically HOA run when I bought in 7 years ago, but after a recent vote passed under suspicious circumstances, the residents inside the gates created a homeowners association, complete with bylaws, fines, and, of course, a board of suburban tyrants. And presiding over all of it? Karen. Her real name is Judith Bellamy, but no one calls her that anymore. She earned her Karen crown after years of power trips, legal threats, and walking around with clipboard like she was directing an FBI sting. Early 60s. Hair in a puffed-up bun. Always wearing a pastel vest with a gold HOA pin that looked like something she ordered off Etsy to feel important. She didn't just enforce the rules. She weaponized them. To be clear, my lakefront cabin sits outside Pineberry Shores. My property was never subject to HOA rules because it was grandfathered in. I bought it in cash, renovated the dock, reinforced the shore, paid all my property taxes early every year, and kept the area clean and well-maintained. My land slopes gently into a private inlet of the lake, crystal clear and surrounded by old-growth pine trees. The perfect spot for fishing at dawn, kayaking at sunset, and quiet weekends away from the world. But Karen didn't see a peaceful man respecting nature. She saw a man with something she didn't control. It began subtly. First, a request to voluntarily comply with Pineberry's new dock color codes. Then a notice left under my windshield wiper while I was launching my kayak, asking me to limit excessive use of the waterway. It escalated to Karen herself confronting me on my own property line, demanding I register my lake access with the HOA, even though they had zero legal authority over my lot. I don't think you understand, she said, with that slow, smug tone that always means trouble. This lakefront is part of the Pineberry watershed. What you do affects the entire community. I gave a polite smile, the kind that said, I'm trying really hard not to laugh in your face. Actually, ma'am, this is a privately owned access point, recognized by the county, deeded to me and maintained solely on my dime. She narrowed her eyes. We'll see what the records say. A few weeks passed without incident. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of voices outside. Not birds, not fishermen, people walking on my dock. I pulled the curtain aside and saw a full-blown family reunion happening on my shoreline. Folding chairs, a grill, kids and floaties. Someone was blasting country music from a Bluetooth speaker. And right there, standing in the shallows like she owned it, was a man I'd never seen before. Middle-aged, sunburned, wearing a Pineberry-proud tank top. I stepped outside, trying to stay calm. Excuse me, can I ask what you're doing on my property? The man looked up casually. Oh, hey, Judith said this lake spot was open for family use. I'm her cousin, Cliff. I blinked. Cliff, this dock, this shoreline, you're standing on my land. He laughed. No, Judith said the stretch technically belongs to the HOA now. Said it was a clerical thing. Something about boundary reassessment. She even showed me a map. A map, that same crumpled, outdated county plot that Karen had printed and paraded around like it overruled a legally recorded deed. My deed, which, for the record, included GPS coordinates, a boundary survey, and a signed affidavit from the previous owner and the county. Cliff wasn't malicious, just misled. But Karen, she knew exactly what she was doing. I told him calmly, I need you and your guests to leave immediately. This is private property. I'm happy to show you the legal documents. He was polite about it, packed up, apologized, even, but the damage was done. Later that evening, I found muddy footprints all over my dock, a crushed flower bed by the fire pit, and a beer can floating in the reeds. That quiet sanctuary I'd spent years building was trampled in one afternoon because Karen decided she could gift it away like party favors. That's when I confronted her. I drove into Pineberry Shores, parked outside the community center where the HOA board met every second Thursday, and walked right in. She was standing behind a folding table with a laminated rulebook in hand, mid-lecture to a pair of bored-looking board members. When she saw me, she smiled like we were old friends. "Mark, so glad you could join us." I didn't smile back. "Did you give my lakefront to your cousin?" She blinked, pretending to be confused. I merely informed him that the boundary line was under review. "It's not under review. It's on record. You knowingly encouraged trespassing on private land." She tilted her head. "Well, that's your interpretation. The HOA has an obligation to ensure uniform usage of shared resources." I leaned in slightly. "I don't think you understand my obligation, Karen. If this happens again, I will file a cease and desist, followed by a civil complaint. And then I will build something that will visibly mark my land so no one, especially your relatives, mistakes it again." Karen smiled sweetly. "We'll see what the survey says." And just like that, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to prove my property line. I was going to put it in plain sight forever. And when I finished, the entire neighborhood would see it. And no one would ever cross it again. The thing about HOA Karen types, they don't back off when they're wrong. They double down. They smile in your face while loading the next legal dart into their clipboard. And in Karen's case, the escalation wasn't just petty. It was full-blown warfare in slow motion, and every neighbor watching knew something was about to explode. After I confronted her at the HOA meeting, she kept her cool. She always did, at least in public. But 2 days later, a white envelope appeared in my mailbox with no stamp, no return address, and no formal signature, just typed in bold. "Notice of potential encroachment. As part of an ongoing community-wide survey, your dock and shoreline landscaping may exceed the bounds of legally recognized lakefront usage per Pineberry Community Guidelines. A third-party assessor will be reviewing this matter shortly." Pineberry Shores HOA Committee. It was a joke, a bluff, a scare tactic pretending to be formal authority. But it was more dangerous than it looked. That night, I called the county records office and double-checked everything. My deed, the most recent plat survey, easement rights, and shoreline boundary lines. Every single document confirmed my lot extended 10 feet beyond a dock, giving me full legal access to the water. Far beyond the fabricated border Karen kept referencing from her crumpled printout. I made copies, printed diagrams, built a folder the size of a high school textbook, and then I installed motion-triggered security cameras. 4 of them pointed at my dock, my shoreline, and the strip of woods that Karen occasionally used to walk muffin directly past my property. I didn't have to wait long. 2 mornings later, at exactly 6:41 a.m., the cameras caught her. Karen, dressed in her signature pastel tracksuit, walking alongside a man I recognized from the HOA board. He was carrying a long measuring wheel and one of those neon flags used for surveying. They stopped right at the base of my dock, squinted at the shoreline, and started planting flags in my soil. She never knocked, never asked permission, never called in an actual county official. Just her and her clipboard brigade, acting like they were on an archaeological dig for buried HOA gold. I printed screenshots from the camera footage and dropped them into my folder. By the end of the week, more signs appeared, this time literal ones. A sandwich board popped up at the entrance of the Pineberry walking trail that said, "Warning, private dock subject to review. Temporary community usage of shoreline, allowed pending decision by HOA land committee." They were trying to rewrite reality with signs. They knew they had no legal ground to stand on, but they were counting on repetition and confusion to do their work for them. If enough people believed the HOA had access to my lakefront, someone would eventually act on it. And they did. That Saturday, a group of teens rolled up with inner tubes and fishing gear and parked right along my fence. I stepped outside and asked calmly if they knew whose land they were on. One of them, a polite-looking high schooler, shrugged. "Mrs. Bellamy said the lakes shared access now." "Not even close. I said, and handed him a laminated copy of my property deed. He looked stunned. She told our whole class during neighborhood club, said it was part of a community vote. That was it. She wasn't just lying to the HOA board. She was teaching kids fake property lines. I reached my breaking point that afternoon. I grabbed my phone, walked back inside, and placed 3 calls. First to the county land assessor's office. Second to a boundary dispute attorney. And third, to a local contractor I'd worked with on a retaining wall project years earlier. I didn't just want to fight this legally. I wanted to end it visibly, permanently, and in a way that no Pineberry newsletter, gossip circle, or HOA resolution could undo. While the county official confirmed my boundary rights once again, the lawyer told me something interesting. He said, "There's no faster way to prove intent than documented harassment. If you can show a pattern, especially with recorded images, you don't just win a case, you build a reputation. And reputation is what HOAs fear more than lawsuits." I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I went on a walk. Not just any walk, a carefully filmed stroll through the neighborhood, with a GoPro clipped to my backpack strap and my phone discreetly recording. I passed Karen's house, noticed her curtains twitch. I walked past the HOA Center bulletin board and saw the flagrant temporary shared shoreline sign still standing. I walked up to it, zoomed in, and recorded the text. Then I crossed the line back to my property and turned to face the lake. My lake. That was the moment the plan clicked into place. If they wanted to pretend they owned access to my water, then I'd give them a line so bold, so physical, so undeniable, no one could cross it without facing consequences. Not just a legal line, a structure, something so deliberate and dramatic it would become the subject of neighborhood legend. A fence, but not just any fence, a wall of architectural spite. The next few days, I played it cool. I didn't respond to the new community bulletin claiming all shoreline homeowners would be grandfathered into compliance if they filed an intent to join the HOA. I didn't show up to the next board meeting. Even though Karen printed my name on the agenda, I let the whispers spread. While behind the scenes, I was drafting blueprints. The fence wouldn't be made of cheap panels or chicken wire. No, it would be built with treated cedar, 6x6 posts, post-sleeve concrete anchors, and decorative iron detailing along the top that would mimic old manor-style garden gates. It would follow my legal boundary line to the inch, every corner staked, every edge laser-leveled. It would rise 7 feet tall in a perfectly symmetrical arc, ending right at the water's edge with an iron gate that locked from the inside. You want a line, Karen? You're about to get one. There's a saying in engineering, design speaks louder than words. And when it comes to HOA Karen, nothing would speak louder than the thing she feared most, a boundary she couldn't touch. By the time the sun rose the following Monday, my driveway was packed. A flatbed truck, loaded with cedar boards, idled near the dock. A cement mixer churned beside a stack of 80-pound bags. And my contractor, Luis, an old buddy from my engineering days, stood there holding a revised blueprint like it was a golden ticket to HOA Judgment Day. Luis raised an eyebrow. "This is poetic, man." I nodded. It's not just a fence. It's a monument. The first post went in at exactly 8:12 a.m. loud, unmistakable. The kind of sound that echoes down empty cul-de-sacs and straight into nosy kitchen windows. By 8:45, Karen was standing across the property line, arms folded, jaw tight, eyes narrowed behind her oversized sunglasses. She didn't say a word at first. Just watched us anchor the first section of concrete footing and mark the next post with spray paint. I could feel her blood pressure rising from 50 feet away. Then she finally snapped. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Luis answered casually without even looking up. "Building a fence. On his land. With a permit." She pivoted her attention to me. "This isn't in compliance with the community sightline policy." I handed her a copy of the county's land ordinance and a stamped copy of my fence permit. "This isn't your community. This is my property. And this line," I pointed at a laser-level tripod, "has been verified by a licensed surveyor in the assessor's office. Want their numbers?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like a printer trying to eject a jammed page. You're violating the visual harmony clause. This fence is aggressive. I didn't flinch. It's precise and legal. She turned sharply and stormed off. But I knew that wasn't the end of it. Karen wasn't just a rule writer. She was a rule bender, twisting anything that even remotely resembled order into ammunition for her personal vendettas. Sure enough, the next day, a shiny black SUV pulled up to the curb. 2 men in county polos stepped out, code enforcement officers. I greeted them calmly and showed them everything. Permits, property lines, diagrams, photo evidence of trespassing, even the security footage of Karen planting those ridiculous survey flags. One of the officers looked impressed. "You've got your ducks in a row." The other one added, "Looks like you've dealt with this before." I smiled. I'm just good at reading blueprints and people. Karen, standing halfway down the sidewalk, watched the entire exchange. When the officers left, without issuing a single warning, she looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon. But her next move? That one surprised even me. 3 nights later, I heard something strange around 11 p.m., a kind of scratching noise near the dock. I pulled up my camera feed and saw the unmistakable silhouette of Karen in a wide-brimmed hat with bolt cutters. She was actually trying to snip through one of the temporary padlocks we'd used to secure the access gate before installing the iron ones. My security system snapped a dozen photos. By 7 a.m., I had printed them all and delivered them straight to the sheriff's substation. Trespassing, attempted vandalism, criminal mischief. I didn't press charges immediately. I wanted something else first, leverage. That afternoon, I made copies of the footage and added it to a new folder. Karen Incidents Organized Documentation. Then I made a few quiet visits around the neighborhood. First to the neighbor on the other side of the lake, Mr. Denton, who'd once caught Karen trying to replant a shrub on his property line to satisfy HOA landscaping symmetry. Then to a younger couple down the road who had racked up over $800 in violation fines for their decorative wind chimes and a toy left on the porch. Then to the elderly woman 2 houses down, whose flower beds Karen had complained about for being too whimsical. Everyone had a story, and none of them had ever spoken up until now. Because when I showed them the footage of Karen trespassing on my land with bolt cutters, something changed. There was a new energy in the air, like the quiet part of the neighborhood had finally realized it didn't have to stay quiet anymore. Together, we organized a formal petition of grievance. Not to the county, to the HOA board itself. Because here's the irony. Karen may have ruled the HOA like a monarch, but she wasn't elected unopposed. The board had 5 seats, and 4 of them could be voted out in the next cycle. 2 of them by special recall if 51% of dues-paying members submitted written grievances. And guess what? We were at 47% before dinner. While the fence crew continued working, I made one final addition to the build, a large wooden sign, tastefully sanded, beautifully stained, and hung above the lock gate at the lake's edge. It read, "Private property. Trespassers will be filmed." Underneath, in smaller letters, "Verified boundary per county survey #1187B. Questions? Call the assessor's office." Luis grinned when I showed him the lettering. "Karen's gonna hate that." I nodded. "Exactly." And just to really drive it home, I installed a motion-triggered speaker that politely repeated the boundary warning whenever someone stepped past the fence line. It was the pettiest thing I've ever done, and also the most satisfying. Karen's war had backfired. She'd pushed too far. And now the very neighbors she thought she controlled were organizing behind her back. The fence wasn't just a barrier. It was a statement. A symbol of what happens when someone tries to rewrite someone else's reality and gets shut down by cold, hard truth. But the final twist? Oh, that was still coming. And it would leave everyone in Pineberry Shores with their jaws on the dock. By now, the fence was more than just lumber and steel. It was legend. Neighbors stopped by just to look at it. A few even brought lawn chairs and coffee, like it was some kind of open-air art exhibit. People nodded in admiration, whispered words like, "Finally and about time," and some even offered to contribute toward legal fees if Karen tried anything else. But they didn't need to. Because just as the fence was completed, Karen made the one mistake that ensured her undoing. She escalated publicly. It happened at the next HOA meeting, held in the community clubhouse on a humid Wednesday evening. By then, word of the Lakefront boundary war had made its way into every cul-de-sac in Pineberry Shores. I arrived 5 minutes early. The room was packed. I wasn't alone. Half the audience was made up of homeowners Karen had fined, lectured, surveilled, or shamed at some point in the past 3 years. The other half were there just for the drama. Karen sat at the center of the board table in her power seat, wearing a salmon-colored blazer and that smug grin that made your blood simmer. She held a stack of papers, which I suspected were doctor bylaws, and opened the meeting with fake calm. "Good evening, residents. Tonight we address a matter of escalating concern regarding unauthorized shoreline developments." She glanced directly at me, "and non-compliant structures that may impact community access." I raised my hand. She ignored it. One of the board members coughed awkwardly and said, maybe we should." Karen waved him off. "I've already filed a provisional injunction," she said. "We'll be moving to restrict access to the lake until further review." That was it. I stood up. "Point of order," I said calmly. "You're not recognized." Karen snapped. I held up a large envelope. "You'll want to recognize this." She paused, eyes flickering with uncertainty. "This," I said, "is an official survey report signed and stamped by the county land assessor, showing the exact property line of my parcel, including exclusive shoreline access granted with the deed." I handed it to the board member who had tried to speak up earlier. "And this," I pulled out a second envelope, thick and heavy, "is a petition signed by over 60% of Pineberry Shores homeowners, calling for an emergency vote of no confidence in this board's leadership. Specifically your leadership." The room went silent. Karen's face went pale. A neighbor behind me whispered, "Oh my God." I continued, "And just for good measure, I've included 3 USB drives. One with footage of you trespassing and vandalizing my property, another with audio recordings from residents you've harassed, and a third with screenshot of HOA bylaws you've altered without board approval." Karen stood up, voice shaking. "You can't do this. This is a private community." "No," I said, "it's a shared community. But you've been treating it like your personal kingdom." People clapped. I didn't expect it. But once it started, it didn't stop. Karen tried to regain control. "This is outrageous. This man has weaponized social media and mob tactics." A man in the back yelled, "What about when you fine my wife $200 for having a potted plant on the porch?" Someone else added, "You told my daughter she couldn't ride her scooter on the sidewalk." It was an avalanche, years of resentment pouring out in a matter of seconds, all aimed at the same person. Karen froze, gripping the edge of the podium like a sailor in a storm. I looked around the room and spoke clearly. This community doesn't need a tyrant. It needs someone who listens. Then I turned to the board. "You have the signatures. You have the documentation. You know what needs to happen." One of the board members, a retired teacher named June, stood up. "I moved to suspend Karen Bellamy's powers as HOA president pending a full vote." A second voice echoed, "I second that motion." And just like that, the vote passed unanimously. Karen stood there, mouth open, stunned. She tried to speak, but June added, "Karen, we'd also appreciate it if you stepped away from further HOA communications while we conduct our review." Boom. Gone. And that's when the real fireworks started. Because without Karen pulling the strings, everything unraveled. The cousin who mysteriously got lake access? Turned out he never applied for a permit. His own dock was removed 2 weeks later. The phony signs about shared shoreline? Taken down by maintenance staff under order of a new interim president. The fines and citations Karen had handed out like candy? Most were reversed. Some came with formal apologies. And me? I added one final touch to the fence, a small brass plaque embedded in the wood. It read, "Respect the line." Simple, subtle, permanent. The neighborhood never quite went back to what was before. It got better, freer. Neighbors started talking more, walking more, letting their kids play out front, without fear of HOA shaming. And Karen? She stayed locked up in her pastel palace at the end of the cul-de-sac, blinds closed, occasionally seen through the kitchen window, watching the community she thought she controlled move on without her. The fence still stands. So does the truth. 3 months had passed since the HOA upheaval, and Pineberry Shores looked different. It wasn't just the cleaner sidewalks or the extra holiday decorations neighbors suddenly felt bold enough to put up. It wasn't the front yard vegetable gardens or the occasional basketball hoop reappearing in driveways. Though all those things played a part, it was the energy, a shift in tone. Like someone had opened a window in a stale room and let fresh air back in. Karen was no longer the president of the HOA, and no one was asking when she might return. After her suspension, the community voted to permanently remove her and restructure the HOA charter. Transparency clauses were added. New leadership rotation limits were imposed. And June, the retired schoolteacher, was elected as the new president in a landslide vote. June was everything Karen wasn't: calm, open-minded, respected. She even held monthly coffee chats on Saturday mornings for residents to voice concerns in a relaxed setting. For the first time in years, people actually wanted to be involved in the HOA. But as for Karen herself, that's where the irony really started to twist the knife. See, in the months following her removal, Karen tried to mount a quiet comeback. First through rumor, then through a legal loophole. She filed a formal grievance against the HOA board claiming wrongful removal and emotional distress. She even hired a lower-end attorney from 2 towns over to argue that the fence was a threat to her mental well-being and that her cousin's dock should be grandfathered in as a legacy fixture. Her case made it all the way to small claims court. And yes, I went. I sat in the gallery with Luis, June, and several neighbors. We didn't come to be loud. We came to watch the fireworks. Karen showed up in a beige pantsuit with a wheeled briefcase. She represented herself after her attorney was no longer available, which we all took to mean he dropped her after the retainer dried up. She stammered her way through a presentation filled with loosely stapled paperwork, blurry cell phone photos of my fence, and a claim that my motion-activated speaker had caused her repeated auditory trauma. Then came my turn. I calmly handed the judge a tab binder with security camera footage, time-stamped survey maps, permit approvals, HOA bylaw copies, the petition of community support, and a flash drive with audio of Karen threatening me. The judge took one look at it and said, "This is one of the most thorough submissions I've seen all year." Karen's face practically turned purple. The case was dismissed on all counts. But the best part? As I walked out of the courtroom, the local newspaper reporter covering community legal cases stopped me outside. "Mind if I ask a few questions?" This sounds like a classic HOA story. People love these. 2 weeks later, a column ran in a regional paper. Homeowner wins battle against rogue HOA president. It went semi-viral in the HOA Reddit world and was even picked up by a few local talk shows. One blogger called my fence the Suburban Berlin Wall, but in a good way. But here's the final twist. Not long after, Karen put her house up for sale. The listing was awkward, buried under neutral language like quiet cul-de-sac, and updated shutters was a line that made me laugh out loud. No direct lake access. Poetic justice. But what happened next? That's the part that left me speechless. One afternoon in early spring, I was trimming hedges near the dock when a couple walked up the sidewalk, mid-40s, energetic, with a golden retriever in tow. "Hi," the man said. "You must be the guy with the fence." I nodded cautiously. "Depends who's asking." He smiled. "We just bought Karen's place." I blinked. "Oh, well, congratulations." He chuckled. "Yeah, we've heard stories. Don't worry, we're not Karen people. Actually, we used to live in a neighborhood just like this one before the HOA went insane." His wife added, "We looked all over. This area is beautiful. And when we found out Karen was moving, we jumped on it." Over the next few weeks, they planted new flowers, put up tasteful outdoor lights, and even added a bench overlooking the lake. Not on my property, of course. They respected the line. And every time I saw them, I was reminded of something that had been missing for years: peace. Because peace doesn't come from rules or fines or plastic neighborhood newsletters with passive-aggressive bolding. It comes from boundaries, real ones. It comes from standing your ground when someone tries to take what's yours. It comes from knowing that no matter how much noise someone makes, facts still matter. And fences, when built right, don't just keep bad things out. They keep the good things safe. So what happened to Karen? Last I heard, she moved in with her cousin. The same cousin she tried to gift my shoreline access to. Poetic? Absolutely. Fitting? More than she'll ever admit. Somewhere out there, she's probably still trying to rewrite rules. Still printing bylaws. Still correcting someone's trash bin placement. But not here. Not anymore. And as I sit by the dock most evenings now, fishing pole in hand, fence behind me, neighborhood at peace, I remember something my grandfather once told me. You don't win wars with anger. You win them with anchors. And this fence? It's the strongest anchor I've ever built.